views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. As you know, it's our new show on BronxNet Television. We come to you every week from BronxNet East Studios at the Hutch Metro Center. The idea, we have a round table here, and we do a round table discussion with Bronx reporters. We talk about all the topics that are important to you, things that they're writing about. And then for the second segment, we talk about one topic of interest that is of interest to you and of course of interest to them and of interest to me. We call that the Bronx Buzz. So tonight I'm thrilled. I said this is the Cadillac of Bronx reporters. We have David Cruz, the editor of the Norwood News. Nice to have you back. Both are coming back for more. They've both been on the show already. And Ed Condi Garcia or Garcia Condi?
Garcia Condi.
Garcia Condi. I get it wrong all the time, but I want to give him a chance to get it right. He, of course, the mayor of Melrose, and of course, the great Welcome to the Bronx website.
Thank you.
And so thanks for both of you to come in. Dave, let's start with you. This is, I guess, this week's paper?
Yes.
Came out this week?
Today.
Today. Oh, just today. Hot off the presses. A lot of interesting things, and actually the front page story about preserving Bedford Park we're going to use as our Bronx Buzz of the week, so stick around for that. But there are a bunch of other interesting things. This idea of car washes, roving car washes, it sounds like a good idea, actually. Listen, we love enterprise in the Bronx, but there are some people who think it's not a good idea.
Well, right.
Explain.
Exactly. Well, the way this came about, I've noticed them just driving around the borough. You start to see a sign up that says car wash, and people just line up and get their cars washed. It's more of a detail. I can't say it's quite like a wash, because a wash is just going through the machine and just having it cleaned to like a once over. But this one, you have guys who spend at least 20 minutes just detailing the car.
So let's just do it. It's like Uber or something. You call up and you say,
No, you go to them.
Oh, you go to them.
They're at designated spots.
So they say, hey, we're stationed at 204th Street.
I don't even think they say we're stationed. You just drive, and if you see a car wash,
if you see them, you go, and then they just hose down. Where do they get the water from?
Well,
is this part of the?
What we found is that the NYPD is saying that overnight these guys use a fire hydrant to load up on the water, and they siphon the water into a water tank, a huge water tank inside a van. It's rigged with the water tank, and they're saying that you can't do that for commercial purposes. Quite frankly, you can't really do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we know that a lot of people do tap illegally into the fire hydrants.
Right.
You're not really supposed to do that. Of course, if you want to use that, the spritz for the summer, then you can contact the FDNY, and they'll work with you in many cases to try and do that.
Exactly.
But what you're saying is these people just go in, they tap in it, they take the water, and then they make a car wash out of it.
Exactly. And the thing is, that's why they are close to a hydrant, but they're not hooked up to the hydrant during the day. But even so, they go ahead and use power washes, they use vacuums, they use soaps that no one knows what's actually in the soap. Could very well be harmless, but the whole point is that they're not registered with the New York City Department of Environmental Protection and through the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They just don't follow any of the rules. It's sort of like a...
Well, and you saw one. I mean, because these photos
yeah.
were taken by you. Did you have your car washed?
I did not. No, ethically, I was going to say I did not want to go ahead and take it out.
What do they charge?
They charge...
Not that I'm going out to do that, I promise.
$15, but...
$15.
The difference here is that it is a 20-minute wash.
It's a real detail.
A real wash. And I've watched them in action, and they do good work, but... Be as it may, it does follow. They're not fully following.
So what happens? Do they get fined? They get summons?
They do get right. So the NYPD issues summonses, and they issue C summonses, which are criminal summonses, and they can get them for having their vehicles, the vans that they normally use for power washing, too close to the hydrant. Can't do that. They can't block the streets. And the NYPD's legal team has been really trying to figure out what they can really do to get rid of these guys.
How big an industry is this, or did you just happen to find one?
No,
or this is like it's popping up?
It's really popping up. It's popping up along Webster Avenue in the Bronx. It's a huge corridor and sometimes a little bit desolate in some parts. And of course, for cars, it's like a key thoroughfare. It'll take people up to Westchester County. And so people could just stop when they see the sign and get their car washed. And that'll be that. And they're roving because they just move around.
Is there a way to work it out that this could become a business, or is this really something that's going to
in
go
the article,
because there's no way to make it happen?
Yeah, in the article, I spoke to the New York City Car Wash Association, where they're basically like a group for legitimate car washes, and they said they would fight this tooth and nail. Mm-hmm. They said it's very unlikely.
Of course, I mean the competition. But to me, this speaks to something, of course, a much larger issue. We're not going to tackle it today. Is people need jobs, people need enterprise, and people, if they come up with an idea, they say, "Let's do it and let's figure it out."
The owner of the car wash, one of them said, this is an honest living and it beats selling drugs.
Well, that's what I mean.
That was a very honest response from
Well, I understand that it may beat selling drugs, it may not be legal, but I do have, and I see Ed is nodding his head, there are people who need some sort of enterprise. Yeah. They don't want to sell drugs or do something even more illegal or more harmful, and so they do this. I also want to ask you about this. A guy on Knox Place was charged with aiding an ISIS terror network. That's pretty scary stuff because, that would certainly suggest that the worst kinds of terrorists are living in our neighborhoods.
Right, and this guy, I went to the building where he lived in and where he was arrested in too, and they were explaining that he was just like a regular guy up until about 2 years ago when he converted to Islam. He started going to the local mosque, and somehow along the way he just became radicalized.
Did he get discovered because neighbors were aware of it, which frankly is something I'd always like to see. I'd like to see neighbors kind of police their own neighborhood, or was it some larger investigation?
It was a larger investigation because in 2014 he tried to go to Syria through the United Kingdom, and he had raised a couple red flags. And I think it was at that point that the feds decided to have an undercover operation on him.
Is there concern that he's part of a larger, we realize ISIS is a larger network, but I'm talking about localized larger network.
I don't know, but that's what we're trying to find out. And that would be really tough because you don't necessarily want to single a certain sect out just because it was just one guy.
And right along with that, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it's just as horrible a story as you can imagine that there was somebody attacked a Muslim in your community, and it's just I'm too sick by it even to talk about it on TV.
Yeah, he lives in Norwood. He drives a cab. He was in Fordham, and he was attacked. And initially, he didn't know that he was a victim of the attack of a bias attack until he started talking to his fellow Muslims and saying that you were a victim.
And I think some of the news reports I read said that they did use the worst kind. And Ed has a reputation among some circles as being a rabble-rouser, as speaking his mind, and I urge you to read welcometothe.bronx.com. But Ed said to me, I want to do happy news today because one of the things you're very good with is when good things are happening. Talk about anything you like. Let's pump up the Bronx.
Well, I think we can start with the Bronx River Alliance's flotilla that happened on this past Saturday. That was an incredible event. I've never canoed down the river.
This was your first time doing it?
My first time. And it's one of those experiences that, even if you're a native Bronxite, you're just like in awe of just seeing the Bronx from a different angle. And that's coming down the river 5 miles through the Bronx Zoo, through Botanical Gardens. And it's also a fundraiser. So that's really the brilliant part. They had a $50,000 goal, and they made about $56,000.
Wow! Oh, I'm going to applaud
definitely
that.
Round of applause.
That is so wonderful.
Yeah, and that actually goes to fund to reach at least 1,000 kids and their families to continue doing the paddling through the river.
And it's not only the canoeing. You've got to know, and certainly if you, like we have been around the Bronx for a while, you've got to know what that river was, and the idea that now we're using it for this beautiful recreational day where people can canoe down the river is great. All right, the next thing is coming up. On land is another way that you can run and ride and play down a thoroughfare. Let's talk about the boogie.
Yeah, so this Sunday is the launch for Boogie on the Boulevard, and that's something that's really exciting. It's our 3rd year doing this as a community.
And folks can see right now how you've written it up on your website.
Yeah,
there.
and what's wonderful about this is that we're sort of doing something that started under Freddie Ferrer, and it was really successful until Giuliani came along and decided to punish the Bronx and punish Ferrer and just nixed the whole idea. And it was the central lanes of the concourse every Sunday from May through November was closed to traffic.
Letting you know how long I've been covering the Bronx, but I remember the dialogue with both the borough president at that time, Freddie Ferrer, and Rudy Giuliani, and they insisted that it was disruptive to emergency vehicles. Baloney.
Yeah.
Right? We can say that on the show. I would use different words, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was baloney, and so now how often is Boogie on the Boulevard going to be?
So this year, instead of doing it 3 Sundays, consecutive Sundays in August, we're doing the last Sunday of each month from May straight through September. And each Sunday's going to have a different theme because we're going to have DJs. So you're going to have disco music and classics, soul and funk on another Sunday.
Walk, skate, run.
And literally boogie down the boulevard.
Boogie down the boulevard in
Art.
any way that you, what were you going to say?
There's also art. There's Montefiore is also, thanks to Montefiore, they're sponsoring a lawn, a 500 square foot lawn that's just going to be plopped.
I saw that.
there.
I saw that in your article. What street is that going to be on?
I'm not sure exactly where the street's going to be on, but the streets are 161st Street to 165th Street this year. This year it's a little shorter because there's construction going on at the concourse. There's a lot of revitalization for the concourse.
Again, we're getting to move around the Bronx. You have been a proponent, of course, to the link to Randall's Island. You're an active bicyclist. Talk to me about that. I mean, these are really great things, and I really appreciate, because when I called you and said, hey, you want to come on the show, usually Ed's got this issue or that issue, but we're doing the right thing in the Bronx.
Yeah, so the Randall's Island Connector has been such a success. It was opened last fall, and I've been using it religiously whenever the weather permitting, but I get to it in 12 minutes versus having to take about half hour if I had to do the old route, which was going up the Triborough, going up the steps and the ramps, and then going all the way back down. Now with the connector, you just go right over.
And the value of that, of course, is to all the playing fields and everything else, plus a nice place to ride your bike and everything else.
330 acres sitting right there for us. We've actually been joking around. I know you've seen when they try to take over Marble Hill and annex it. So now we're actually planning annexing Randall's Island, because it's literally like just 10 feet away during low tide.
Wow. Did we just break some news here on the Bronx Buzz? We just buzzed you something pretty good. Last thing I just want to mention before we take our break, and we're going to do our Buzz of the Week, this idea of David Schwimmer shooting a TV show in the Bronx, which really is, almost like opening up the future. We're going to have the York Studios is going to be here. There's been a lot of talk that a lot of TV shows have been shot in the Bronx, so let's just talk about the Schwimmer show.
Yeah, so Schwimmer's new show is, the Bronx is basically, I guess, is another character, because his dream was to open up a restaurant in the Bronx. He's a widower on the show, single father, and he's a sommelier, so that was his goal, is to open up a restaurant in the Bronx. And it's interesting because I think it's the first show in a long time that the Bronx is prominent is in the
Well, didn't
show.
Ted Danson have a show that was featured in the Bronx? Wasn't it? It was like a cop show or something that was. Well, of course I can't remember what it is. But somebody go Google that right now and find out. But no, Ted Danson did have a show. I think he was a cop in the Bronx or something like that. But this is good news.
So now it's back. We have that, and there have been a lot of shows that have been filmed in the Bronx for the last few years. You have Gotham, you have Orange is the New Black, and from Netflix. Mm-hmm. They're constantly filming. But the good thing is that this is a show that again, it's based in the Bronx. It's not just using the Bronx as a backdrop. If
you want the Bronx to improve, and the lesson here is somebody who fights as hard as he can for issue after issue. we got to promote the good things too, because that's what's going to build this borough. So I really appreciate you having that attitude. On the other hand, we're about to go to the Bronx Buzz, and we're going to talk about community self-determination, and then we're going to get down to, can you get things changed in your neighborhood for the better? And if not, why not? And do you control it, or does somebody else control it? The Bronx Buzz is the program. We'll do the Buzz of the Week right after this.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science. After that, I'm going to get my law degree. Then I'm going to come back to Detroit, boost the economy, become the mayor or something, try to make the situation better for other people. I feel like I owe it to the city. I'm determined. It's going to happen. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Okay, we're on the Bronx Buzz. It is a Bronx Reporters Roundtable coming to you from BronxNet East Studios at the Hutch Metro Center. Our guests are David Cruz, the editor of the Norwood News, and Ed Garcia-Condi, I got that right, who is the mayor of Melrose and, of course, the progenitor of Welcome to the Bronx.com, one of the most important news blogs, news and information blogs in the Bronx. So we're going to talk about community self-determination. Right on the front page of the Norwood News is preserving Bedford Park. People of Bedford Park are upset because Woodlawn was downzoned, which means they will be somewhat protected from overdevelopment, whereas the people of Bedford Park are saying, why them, why not me? What's your take on what's going on over there?
Well, there was a meeting that happened last week with the New York City Department of City Planning's Bronx office, and they had explained to the folks in Bedford Park that the reason we can't downzone is because if we were to go ahead and downzone a specific neighborhood, that means that the character of the neighborhood, the overall character, will be in what they call non-compliance. So in other words, right now, this neighborhood that we're talking about is considered an R8. You could build up to 10 stories. But they want to downzone it to either a R7B or an R5. And if they go ahead and just downzone it, that means that 95% of the buildings of that neighborhood would not be in compliance. No penalties.
So then the question is, and then we're going to talk to Ed about the proposed apartment complex right on the Grand Concourse, just south of Hostos. Is it possible? Then is it possible for people in this neighborhood to say, you know what, we like the character of our neighborhood. We don't want to keep having. If there's going to be development, we want to be able to control it. Or is it out of control?
It's a little more complicated than that.
Damn it! It's always more complicated.
It's very complicated because the hard part is that Bedford Park is made up of houses, but if a developer comes in, offers someone a couple million to leave the property, then really the responsibility comes down to the homeowner. The homeowner's going to go ahead and say, I'd want to leave my building.
Or to the city to protect them in terms of having proper zoning, so that can't be done. Ed, I know you have strong feelings about that complex just south of Fordham Road, south of 149th Street,
yes,
where Hostos is. Why don't you talk about that?
So after we fought several years to protect the landmark PS31 Castle on the Concourse, it was torn down, which was, in my opinion, a criminal act to do that. That would never have happened in another borough, but the Bronx, of course.
You think?
Absolutely.
You think it wouldn't have happened in
Absolutely.
Brooklyn or
Nope.
Queens?
We don't have any. We don't have anything in recent memory that a landmark was raised the way they did that to PS31.
Nonetheless,
exactly. Just as I predicted, I knew there was a big plan for that site, and lo and behold, the Blasio administration has what's going to be the tallest building on the concourse, if it's approved, at 24 stories taller than Executive Towers. And Executive Towers is an outlier in the concourse because the average height on the concourse is 6 stories. So here you have a building that is, they want to rezone the block to plop this building down, 24 stories. This doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood.
So I guess back to the original question. This is something you and many others had fought against. Is it possible for communities to control and have self-determinate what goes into their neighborhoods? Or are the powers out there too strong to prevent that?
I think we need to be at the table and have that conversation. Like, I think you have to be present in your community board meetings.
Right here.
Exactly.
Round table right here. I'll run that meeting.
And what I mentioned earlier, Indian Village in the Bronx, they were successful under the Bloomberg administration of all administrations. They were successful in downzoning their neighborhood. So, to prevent all the McMansions that were popping up in 2003 and at the height of the market.
In order to get communities around the table, it seems to me you would have to have local elected officials that agree, because if not, you just don't have a chance.
Yeah, local elected officials and property owners. Now, in a place like the South Bronx, most people don't own property, so it's a lot harder for us to actually be able to, push things the way we want to see it. But nevertheless, we have to make an attempt and be vocal.
You were very passionate, which I thought was interesting because it's not really in the neighborhood you're known for, about Shore Road, which is like Orchard Beach on up into Westchester. There was a video done by some guys who were very concerned about the condition of Shore Road. Why did you take that up as something? Because you told me a couple of times, can I come on and talk about Shore Road? Why did you take that up when, goodness gracious, your plate is full, dude.
Well, Shore Road was brought to my attention by the Breen brothers who live over on City Island, and they had this amazing footage showing how this huge crater just near Bartow Pell Mansion fills up with water from most likely groundwater seeping up. It freezes over, and it causes it's a 2-lane road, one lane in each direction. Cars swerving to the other lane to avoid that crater. And the reason I decided to write about that, I know the road very well. I traveled it many times when I went to college, and it also shows how the priorities of the city are. That northeastern corner of the Bronx, is so close to Westchester that it's forgotten.
But yes, it may be, but nobody really lives there. It's not really running through some of the, well, I don't mean nobody, but certainly not the kind of communities that we have in the Bronx. But on the other hand, having said what I just said, we're talking about paving a road. Isn't that what we're talking about? Or is this more complex
It's
than
more
that?
complex. Since it's technically inside Pelham Bay Park, it's a parks issue. It's also a Department of Environmental issue because of the water. It's also a Department of Transportation issue. So it's a matter of trying to get all these entities together at the table and come up with a solution. They're trying to figure out where's the water coming from. Is it a broken pipe, or is it the water table? Most likely it's the water table because it's right next to, hence the name, Shore Road. Right. It's right along the shore. So I spoke to several agencies, and they told me that they are working on the problem, but there's no timetable of when it's going to get fixed. Now, people in City Island and also Westchester, since a lot of Westchester residents use it, they're concerned because they're just it's an accident waiting to happen, and they want to get it done before a tragedy happens.
Mm-hmm. Dave, just back up. We're going all over the borough here, which I love to do. In your neighborhood, just thinking about having the community dictate what they want to see. The biggest potential project would be the proposal to cover over the rail yards over by Lehman College and Bedford Park. So there are going to be many people who want to have their hooks in it, many financial entities, many political entities. What sort of framework do you think would work so that at least people who live in the region would say, gee, we kind of got out of it what we thought we wanted?
Well, I actually think that the community board at the that covers that area, Community Board 7, they are a very active board. But at the same time, they're active in the sense that they want to have a voice at the table. And I think the best approach is actually having forum after forum and having something on paper that would allow them to actually say, here was our 2 cents too.
I'm going to use that and jump right back to Ed and talk about the Jerome Avenue study. We've had forum after forum. Now we've seen very recently that they're going to postpone the results of that study. Is that a process that works, these forums? Or, is it just one of those things, well, we just kind of pretend that we're really listening?
I think that it's something that actually works. I mean, the fact that it's being postponed to release those,
it's a good
study.
sign.
It is a good sign.
I agree 1,000%.
It's not being rushed. Originally, the timetable was much shorter, and we made such a big stink of it that we were able to make sure that it was going to be a community-oriented plan, that the city wasn't going to come in and say, this is what's good for you. No, the city doesn't live there. The government officials don't live there. They're not there every day. The people are, and that's who should dictate what the changes are going to be.
This, of course, leads, and I almost hesitated bringing up the Jerome Avenue study because it just leads into so many things, and I know you've been, somewhat of an expert because of your background in real estate on gentrification. And so I'll ask you this very briefly, and we did 3 shows on Bronx Talk about it. Is it possible to do get the results of what they want at Jerome Avenue without displacing somebody? Seems to me you've got so many businesses, and he's shaking his head no. I got my answer.
I mean, when you look at the character of the corridor, they're all 1-story buildings for the most part. Once that's rezoned, all those auto mechanics are out.
Fellas, I could sit and talk the Bronx with both of you all night long. However, time has come. David Cruz from the Norwood News. Thank you. Folks, check out norwoodnews.org. That's all. You got it. That's all. Because it's not only about their neighborhood, it tells you something about your neighborhood, too, that you can learn about. And, of course, welcome to thebronx.com is a staple for anybody, really, who's interested in the Bronx. Whether you like what he writes or you don't like what he writes, it's one of those things. It's a must-read in the borough of the Bronx. Ed Garcia-Condi, thank you so much. Guess what? We'll be back. I'll be here Monday night for Bronx Talk and a really special show with some kids who play music. And then we'll be back here Thursday night for the Bronx Buzz.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.